So it's Monday morning. I am walking up to the annex because this Wednesday, in 2 days, the next episode of our podcast, Overdue, is scheduled to air. So we need to record it. So we thought it'd be fun to make a vlog out of it. So we'll try to show you just a little bit of the planning process, a little bit of the recording process, and I'll show you a bit of editing and post-production, and then finally uploading it to the server so that it'll go live on Wednesday morning. We are by no means professional podcasters nor YouTubers. It's an incredibly amateur operation, but we have fun with it and we think it's worthwhile. So we thought it'd be cool to document it. Enjoy. That's what I want to do.
Yes, that's exciting.
Okay. So I was thinking I could talk about how I went and talked with Brooke's classes
Okay.
about
Are you talking about for the podcast
Yes.
or for right now?
for the podcast.
Okay.
This is just candid,
Oh, okay.
and I'll edit it all.
I didn't know
through.
if you had even started it.
Oh yeah,
Okay.
it's been rolling. I got you
Cool.
walking down here.
Oh, nice.
That's not true.
Yeah, because I didn't walk.
To say like, hey, look for this coming out on the YouTube channel,
Mhm.
and then I could even play my example in the podcast of the audio recording that I did for the Apple book I'm reading,
Okay.
and say like, hey, this in the future we're gonna have some things like this coming through from our students, and
Okay.
that might have been my only thing, was just to
Highlight the book talks.
highlight the fact that we're about to have some student involvement
Okay.
in talking about books.
Cool. Okay. Did we want to at all discuss the nonfiction, or did we do that in the last one?
I was thinking about that. I don't remember if we did or not.
And I don't know if we have any even more to talk about there. I was just trying to think of all the things we have
Right.
kind of in the works. I thought about, since we have gone back through and processed all the books that we've purchased recently.
Yes.
Maybe
a lot of new books.
we could highlight a couple that maybe like we'll read eventually, not right now because we have others, but that we're really excited to have in the collection. Like maybe pick
Okay.
one or two. Okay, so we definitely have the student involvement. What do you think about that, of pulling a couple of books that we've processed that we're excited to have
Sure.
for students?
Sure.
Okay.
Like 2 each?
Yeah, let's
Okay.
do that. And then, did we want to, I mean, is it unreasonable to think about picking like a suspenseful book for Halloween coming up in 2 weeks?
It's not a bad idea. Something that we've read, or something that,
It would have to be something I need to read.
yeah, like that's why I'm asking, because
Mine will not be scary. It will be
you know,
suspenseful.
I've read plenty of the books in that mystery section, but probably none that are Halloween-y. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Mine probably won't be Halloween
And
either.
anything that I've read in the
Freaks
horror
me.
section, I've probably already talked about.
Okay.
Because it's so few books.
I mean, we don't have to do that. It was just a thought.
Oh, no, I'm okay with it. I'm just trying to think.
Mine will
Like, I'm not going to read a book between now and then.
You can
I
say
just
that.
don't know if I mean, I like it. I just don't know if I can read that, if I'm going to have the time to read that much.
Yeah, I don't know that I will either.
So this is our podcast studio. Usually I sit there and Mrs. Watts sits there. It's still a work in progress. You can see all the wires on the table there. I know Mrs. Watts has some foam things to put on the walls to help with the acoustics a little bit. And this one isn't totally necessary, but I'd really like to get some like clip-on booms for the mics that we can clip onto the table and just make them a little bit more easily adjustable and just a little bit cooler looking, to be frank. But let's get recording.
Welcome back to Overdue. I'm Mrs. Watts, your Annex Librarian.
And I'm Coach Hill, your main building librarian. In today's episode, we get ready for Halloween. Okay.
All right, so in light of the Halloween episode, we decided to read some graphic novels.
Yeah, it was fun. It was your idea.
It was. We had to do something festive. So I chose, actually one that you read last year, Pumpkinheads by Rainbow Rowell.
Got it.
Thanks, man.
You've got it.
Appreciate it. What book did you pick to read?
I read Joe Quinn's Poltergeist.
Just looking at the cover from here, it looks like something I don't think I could.
Yeah, the art was really cool.
But we also chose, so to start the year, we have added tons of new books.
Yeah,
to our
listen,
collection.
we've talked about our collection at length here, almost every episode,
It's
about
true.
the large changes that we're making. I want to hear about this one because I'm just looking at it. I'm like hardly even listening to you because I'm looking at this one.
Yes, okay, so this
Because
one.
I love All the Light We Cannot See.
Well, that's why
I love that
I
one.
bought it. So I've actually never read that
Oh
one.
man.
But I know that.
Paul.
Yeah.
It's been at least a year since I've read some YA sci-fi, and this one seems pretty popular.
Awesome.
So yeah, if for no other reason,
Yeah, I was getting ready to place my last
I'm gonna read that
order.
book.
And
How'd you find that?
I sometimes just go through the Amazon lists. It popped up when I was looking at another book, like
Is it?
yes, of course. So maybe I'll read All the Light We Cannot See while you read that one, and then we could talk about it.
So we use GarageBand to record our podcast. We have different tracks in here that are our music tracks and different ones where we record us talking. When it's time for me to edit, the first thing that I do with each of our tracks that we've spoken with is kind of trim off the end here. You can see right here where Mrs. Watts has talked, and you can see right here where I've talked, and you can see kind of where it cuts off. So I usually try to get it as close as possible, even though it's not totally necessary.
Welcome back to Overdue. I'm Mrs. Watts, your Annex Librarian.
And I'm Coach Hill, your main building librarian. In today's episode, we get ready for Halloween. I'll trim that up. There's macros for it. I just use the mouse most of the time. And then, once I have the spoken tracks trimmed up, and sometimes I have to do some editing too, just depending on if we had any unexpected interruptions or something. But once I've finished editing the spoken tracks, then I'll fit them in to our music tracks. So up here is our intro music, and this dot right here, you can see where the music gets really loud here. That's right where we want the speaking to stop. So it doesn't have to be perfect, but I try to line up the end of this track right with this dot so that it'll sound like this.
Welcome back to Overdue. I'm Mrs. Watts, your Annex Librarian.
And I'm Coach Hill, your main building librarian. In today's episode, we get ready for Halloween. And then it goes through. You can see where I've adjusted the fading and everything. Sometimes I'll take this dot and I'll move it a little bit closer to where the speaking track starts, but it's not super necessary, especially once it goes through post-production. But essentially, I'll take all of these tracks and I'll do that. I'll take our transition music and move it around if I need to. You can see the spots where I've had it in the past, where I've had to fade it in and out. Same thing with the outro music down here. And we get all of our music just from free sources online that have different licensing rules in terms of giving credit to the artist. And we do all of that in our podcast description when we upload. But that's essentially our editing process. And so once everything's done and I've lined it all up and I've got everything where I want it, I do listen to it all the way through just to make sure nothing weird happened. And once I feel good about it, I go to share, I export the song to disk, I just leave that alone, I put it right on the desktop, and I do export it as a WAV file. However, you'll see in a second that when I do the final step, I change it to an MP3 because our podcast server no longer accepts WAV files, and they will only take the MP3. But for now, I leave this as WAV, and I hit export, and I let GarageBand do its thing, and then we move on to post-production. A program called Auphonic for post-productions. It's free up to 2 hours a month. You can see that we've used a little bit of our monthly time already down here. But I just go to new production. I have all these settings down here. I've saved all the ones that we need for our podcast, so I put that on Overdue preset. I find our file here, which is this guy. Open them up. And again, everything here is pre-saved to how I've set it. I was just talking about real quick here, you can see that our output will be an MP3 because that's what our podcast server requires now. It won't take the WAV files anymore. And once I have that up there, I'll just hit start production. Get out of here, start production. And the first thing it'll do is upload the file, and then it'll let me know when it's done. So this whole process for our short podcast that really doesn't have a ton of music or anything takes less than 5 minutes. But you can see up top here how it kind of evens out all of the sound. Down here is the original, and you can see all the peaks and everything, and you can see up here in the output how everything is much more even, and you can definitely hear the difference when you listen to it, that everything just sounds a little more clear, which is cool. So once it's finished with that, you can hit download. And then you have the post-production file that'll be ready to upload. The very last thing to do is to upload our completed file to our podcast host. We use Castos. We started with another one when we first started the podcast last school year, but we switched over to Castos because it worked for us a little bit better. So I'm going to add an episode, title, description, media file, keywords for searching. This is our second season, episode 5. It's a regular episode. We just use our basic stock image and make sure we have it scheduled at the right time. And the very last thing to do is hit publish.
Welcome back to Overdue. I'm Mrs. Watts, your Annex librarian.
And I'm Coach Hill, your main building librarian. In today's episode, we get ready for Halloween.